This is Samantha Wigan with United Way Worldwide, and I just wanted to greet everyone and thank everyone for attending. I want to also say that United Way Worldwide is so thrilled to be partnering with the PTA, CEDL, and Harvard Family Research Project on this. And with that, I'm going to get us started. We have a packed agenda that's hopefully going to be very exciting to everyone. So I'm going to introduce Ms. Shayla Duran, and if you want to get going, Ms. Shayla.
Sure. Thank you, Samantha. And thank you all for joining us today for the webinar series, Achieving Excellence in Family, School, and Community Engagement. Today's webinar, the Teacher-Parent Relationship Using Professional Development to Improve Family and Community Engagement, will feature voices from the field, parents, higher education, and capacity builders. The presenters for this webinar include Beatrice Ceja from the U.S. Department of Education, Chuck Sailors from the National PTA, Jane Groff from the Kansas PERC, Katherine Mora from the Columbia University Head Start, and Susan Walker from the University of Minnesota. Beatrice Ceja from the U.S. Department of Education's Office of Innovation and Improvement will provide opening remarks. Beatrice?
Thank you. Good afternoon. As introduced, my name is Beatrice Ceja, and I am the Program Manager for the Department's Transition to Teaching Program and the School Leadership Program. And improve. I want to welcome you to today's webinar. I believe that the topic we are discussing today is another critical ingredient in our recipe for student success. Many years ago, I read a short story in the book entitled Chicken Soup for the Soul, where a student asks his teacher to help build him a future. He recalls his mother's words and informs the teacher that his mother said that he was going to school because that's where the teacher would help build his future. I know I'm not really doing justice to the story, but I share this with you as a reminder of the trust that every parent places on us as teachers and principals. These parents trust that when they deliver their child to a school, their child will be respected, valued, and taught. Additionally, parents expect that their child will be career and college ready as a result of attending public schools. As the department moves from identifying teachers as highly qualified, which was defined as credentialed teachers, we are moving into developing ways that will identify teachers as effective teachers. Our charge, then, is to support rigorous preparation programs that will prepare individuals to become effective teachers. That said, we believe that being an effective teacher requires an understanding of the importance of engaging families in the education of their students. Teacher preparation programs must provide their candidates coursework and experiences that will help them build strategies for engaging families and working with community organizations. Let's face it, students are not these independent, standalone individuals. They are influenced by family dynamics that include cultural and economic factors. Therefore, it is imperative that teachers recognize this and work through whatever preconceived notions they may have and learn from their preparation programs how to build bridges for students and their families that will foster learning. As previously mentioned, I manage both a teacher preparation program and a principal development program. Both of these programs promote funded projects to work with their candidates to ensure that they have the knowledge and skills needed that will promote positive teacher-parent relationships. Additionally, we promote these programs and support them financially so that they will prepare individuals that will promote schools that are accessible, parents, and inclusive. Teachers and principals are positions of authority in schools. With that comes responsibilities. Parents expect that teachers will teach and that principals will lead and ensure that the school is safe and welcoming. Parents expect educators inspire their children. Meeting these expectations requires both skills and attention to the hope we have as educators for our students and their parents. In a recent article written by Shane Lopez of Gallup, he wrote, helping students become more hopeful can improve their ability to learn as well as make them more resilient for future challenges. Hopeful students are energetic, full of life. They're able to develop many strategies to reach goals and plan contingencies in the event that they face problems along the way. But how do we build that hope if our schools and our teachers are not respectful to the parents of these students? I remember an experience when I was visiting a school in Florida. I won't say the name of the school, but I remember the experience very vividly. I walked in. I was to meet with the principal to conduct a site visit of that school. As I walked into the main office, rather than be greeted, I was asked to take a seat, and then I was told that no one there spoke Spanish. To my surprise, I looked around to see if they were speaking to someone else. Then, when I spoke to the secretary, I said, actually, I'm not a parent. I'm here to visit the principal, and I do speak English. But I thought to myself, imagine if I were a parent. How would I feel? Is that school actually welcoming? What is the cultural context of that school? What is the culture that's being built by that principal? And are the teachers developing positive relationships with the parents of that community? So, as you listen to the experts, I would like for you to think about your own attitude and perceptions of parent-teacher relationships. Are you engaging educators, other educators in the conversation that positive parent-teacher relationships really matter? Are you hopeful for these families? And are you serving as beacons of hope? Are your schools welcoming and accessible to parents? I want us to think about removing any notion that we have that picks on us and says, oh, parents don't care. And rather that we move to a belief system that respects parents, respects the families that we work with, values them, and provides them with every tool necessary that will help build partnerships that in the end will educate every child in our school to be college and career ready. Thank you.
Thank you for those thoughtful remarks, Beatrice. Just wanted to remind our participants that we will be taking questions after each segment of the presentation. So please be sure to submit your questions through the Q&A chat room. It is now my distinct pleasure to introduce National PTA's President, Charles J. Chuck Saylors. Chuck is the PTA's first ever male national president and has been a PTA member for almost 20 years. Saylors started volunteering for PTA when his oldest son, Matthew, was in the first grade in Greer, South Carolina. Chuck continues to volunteer at his youngest children's middle school. He also serves as a trustee for the school district of Greenville County in South Carolina, serving 2 years as board chair, and is a former board member for Greenville technical college. Chuck?
Thank you, Michela, and good afternoon to everyone that is participating in this, what I certainly hope will be a very informative and very valuable conversation. We're here today to discuss a number of things that will do everything possible to bring teachers and parents closer together in the education conversation when it comes to our children. As the parent of two children that are still in middle school, one is 15, one is 12, I know from firsthand experience that good communications between the home and the school environment are critical. We have heard over and over again experts tell us that when parents are engaged in a child's educational experience, that child is going to be more successful. And so what I hope we can bring to you today is best practices, some success stories, if you will, from the field that will help each and every one of you meet those needs in building a better communication trail between home and school. As you see before you today, there are a number of key indicators that show that parent-teacher partnerships are extremely important. The Hart Research and Associates have indicated, as you can see, that teachers have identified engagement from the family as one of the top strategies for education reform. And education reform is a tremendously hot topic right now between Common Core standards and conversations that are going on throughout this country at a state and community level. We realize that in order to improve the system, there are some challenges that we must all face. And so education reform being the watchword of the day, we certainly believe that family engagement is one of those key common practices, success stories that we can use. As you'll see here also from a survey in 2009, strong positive relationships with parents play a key role in retaining teachers. You know, we all see this, and as a school board trustee, I see this more often than not, where a young, energetic, very enthusiastic teacher who graduated from college last year is placed in the classroom today, and in many cases, within 3 to 5 years, he or she has gone on to another profession. That's a tremendous tragedy, that the fact that these young people have chosen to enter such a great profession as teaching, yet they get overwhelmed very quickly. And a lot of that has to do with a lack of communication with home. And so one of the things that the PTA is trying to do is encourage parents to be more open, to communicate more with the classroom teacher, because, again, that's where the success truly is. And then as you'll see here from a MetLife survey, new teachers identified engaging families as the number one area where they needed more participation. I use this story quite often. When I was in school, my father worked, my mother did not. And so my mother had an opportunity to volunteer in our school, and I was the benefactor of that volunteerism. Today, most parents work more than one job each. And so the level of need is still there. Talent pool and the ability to participate is diminished. And so what we're trying to do through this conversation today and others is to try to get more parents engaged. In Hillsborough County Public Schools, which is in the Tampa, Florida area, you'll see here on this slide some best practices where Hillsborough has worked very hard to develop some great skills on getting parents engaged. You'll see the Empowering Effective Teachers Institute. It's an ambitious program that has really improved that two-way communication between home and school. And the PTA leadership in that area, as well as the school administration, have developed some tremendous relationships that is making the home and the school the benefactor. You know, the district works with a parent consortium. They create professional development for teachers. And that's one thing that I would certainly hope in the future we can see at the college level is more curriculum developed for new teachers, students of teaching, to learn more about parental engagement. Hillsborough is leading the charge in that area. You'll also see that Hillsborough PTA trains the teachers on how to share those academic successes and also make sure that those standards are passed along to the family. So again, these are just some minor examples of some of the success stories in the area. In Federal Way in Washington State, you'll see that family engagement professional development is performed for all. So the Federal Way staff, even whether it's a bus driver, a custodian, a principal, a teacher, anyone in between, they all create that welcoming. My middle school experience, my mother found her way to become a school secretary at the elementary school where I went. And after her retirement, we figured that she had 30 years of service as both a volunteer and an employee at that school. And one of the things that she impressed upon me as a parent when my oldest came along was that the school must create a welcoming environment. First person that comes in that door should be the welcoming face, the welcoming voice, making those parents feel welcome in that school. And of course, you'll see here in Federal Way, district-level family engagement staff serve on a number of committees. They want to make sure that their new school leaders have a core knowledge of family engagement. In Oakland Unified in California, you can see here where connecting family engagement to school-wide goals is a success story. Oakland Unified trains their parents, their principals on how to partner with families, reduce truancy, and to make sure that the student attendance is at its highest level. They want to make sure that educators are trained on how to work with families, to monitor attendance and implement effective interventions, make sure that the child spends their day in a quality environment. Boston Public Schools in Massachusetts has a tremendous program working with the PTA to put the PTA standards into practice. They work with the National PTA's research-based National Standards for Family and School Partnerships to help develop a blueprint for their professional development. This material, the mentioned National Standards for Family School Partnerships, can be found on our PTA website, which is pta.org. But in Boston, the district also provides training for teachers and principals on how to integrate family engagement into the instructional strategies. Now, how many parents go to parent-teacher conferences and they don't necessarily feel comfortable because they don't completely understand what's being presented from the staff to the parent? We want to work with the schools to make sure that those knowledge gaps, those bridges are built. And then last year in Boston, their family engagement was one of the district's core goals for all principals, and that is a very sizable district. So support from the state level all across the country. We have 15 states that have codified the National PTA standards of family and school partnerships into law or policy within their areas. And these standards give educators, parents, teachers, everyone a clearer picture on how to provide that family engagement, help develop those strategies that'll improve the school's efforts. And I'll turn it over to Jeanne now.
Well, thank you, Chuck, for highlighting the best practices on professional development on the district level. We do have a few questions from our participants. One of our participants wanted to know, how do we move PTA from fundraisers to advocacy and empowering parents? Chuck, could you describe some of your work with helping PTA make that shift?
Well, and I appreciate the question because I often say if I could wave a magic wand and get PTA out of the gift wrap and chocolate bar business, I would. 114 years ago when PTA was founded, it was a child advocacy and welfare association. Our goals then were to make sure children were in schools, not on factory floors, that their health and welfare was sound and strong, that they had hot lunches and safe transportation to and from school. And we have unfortunately gotten into the fundraising business because of budgetary issues at all of the levels. So I would love to eventually see us get back into more of an advocacy role than we are today. We are the strongest advocacy association in the country, bar none. But we do get that association of being the predominant fundraiser. What I do on the local level and at the national level is try to encourage through our relationships with school administrators associations, with school boards associations, and with our friends in the classroom, that they need to be asking parents to do those advocacy-related tasks. For example, parents are your best resource when it comes to dealing with questions of shortfalls in school budgets. I spoke last year at the National School Board Conference and told them in simple terms that they have at their disposal an army of parents that are willing to take on the responsibilities of carrying the load when it comes to talking to the holders of the purse strings, if you will, related to school funding. And if you want to get an elected official's attention, get a group of parents upset over the fact that their child's educational system is going to suffer because it's not properly funded. Those are the kinds of conversations we generate and we need to continue to generate.
Thank you, Chuck. We have another question from a participant, and the question is there a school policy regarding communication skills for staff assisting parents in the front desk at schools? And I know with our national PTA standards, we do have the Welcoming All Families standard. So could you speak to how that standard gets implemented in schools?
Well, you are correct with the Welcoming All Families as part of our standards, and those do encourage a welcoming, open, positive environment. Is that a mandated policy or practice in every school district? Sorry to say that is not, because it is still to the discretion and responsibility of each school district to develop whatever policies fall in that area. What PTA is trying to do is provide school districts and school leaders with best practices through the national standards, this being one of them, where we can show the families and the school family as well the best practice on being a welcoming environment. I don't know if that completely answers the question, but again, it's still a school district by school district process on how those policies are developed.
Thank you, Chuck. I know you talked about the great work that Hillsborough PTA is doing around professional development, and I know they have been an active player with the Common Core state standards. Can you talk about the role that PTAs can play in training educators on Common Core state standards?
Well, as you know, we are working, PTA was very first educational association that came out in favor of the Common Core standards when the Governors Association and the Council of State School Chiefs first suggested their implementation. And the reason for that is we see so many times parents moving from state to state where a family may live on the East Coast and they relocate to the central U.S. or the West Coast, and all of a sudden they discover that their child has a different set of accountability measures to live up to for graduation and advancement in grade. So Common Core standards still allows each state the flexibility to keep their own fingerprint, if you will, on the accountability standards in their community while offering a level playing field for everyone. And so what's going on with Hillsborough and other schools and school districts around the country that are involved in this is we're training parents on the messaging that needs to come from this movement so everyone in the community understands that this is not a series of mandates. Everyone should understand that this is not the Federal Department of Education sending down from on high, if you will, a series of mandates. This is not Congress reforming legislation. This is an organic conversation that's coming from the governors and the state school chiefs. We would certainly hope that the Department of Education and the Congress will continue to move forward in supporting what they have been able to do so far. But this is something that comes from the states. And so what we're trying to do as an association is give those that live in those states the knowledge and the conversation tools to be able to promote this as a good thing.
Well, thank you, Chuck, for that enlightening presentation. I would now like to introduce our next set of presenters, Jeanne Groff and Katherine Mora. Jeanne Groff has served as the director of the Kansas Parent Information Resource Center, or the KPIRC, for 3 years. While supervising KPIRC priorities, Jeanne focuses on professional development to Kansas educators and administrators and technical assistance to districts and schools on family engagement. She also provides trainings for family on parent leadership, parent advocacy, and family engagement in education. Jeanne is a certified teacher in preschool, elementary, and secondary special education and taught for 25 years in both general and special education classrooms. She has earned a master's degree in education and is currently a PhD candidate. Jeanne worked at the Kansas State Department of Education and Special Education Services for 3 years before becoming the director of KPIRC. Katherine Mora received her MSED in Early Childhood Bilingual Education from Bank Street College of Education. She has taught as an adjunct instructor in the Dual Language Bilingual Education Department at Bank Street for the past 8 years. Ms. Mora is currently an educator coordinator at Columbia University Head Start. Prior to this, she was Head Start director of a program in Central Harlem. Ms. Mora has consulted on various bilingual publishing projects, including writing ESL manuals for textbook series by McGraw-Hill and ebooks with children's authors. Jeanne, I would like to turn it over to you for your presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Shayla. It's a pleasure to be part of the webinar today, and thank you for the opportunity to share just a snapshot of some of the teacher preparation initiatives that are happening in Kansas in regard to family engagement. But just as a reminder, the Kansas Parent Information Resource Center, or KPIRC, serves as a federally funded family engagement technical assistance center for Kansas. So we work collaboratively with the Kansas State Department of Education, and we provide professional development and technical assistance to districts and to schools all across Kansas. And we also provide support and training to families on parent leadership, advocacy, and the importance of family engagement in education. As Chuck mentioned earlier about the MetLife survey, educators felt least prepared to engage families upon graduation from teacher education programs. Research also states that new teachers tend to see parents as adversaries rather than allies if they're not given training in teacher pre-service programs. KPIRC believes that we must reach both families and educators with the importance of family engagement. So KPIRC decided one of the best places to reach educators was early in their pre-service training to form healthy, supportive perspectives on family engagement. In order to do this, KPIRC developed a vision for educating teachers of the 21st century. This vision promotes the embedding of family engagement into pre-service curricula, informing pre-service students of the research between family engagement and its link to improving student performance, encouraging institutions of higher education, or IHEs, to utilize the professional education standards, number 9 and 10, which address the collaboration of families and educators. And finally, to introduce the PTA National Family School Partnership Standards in our pre-service programs, because they were endorsed by the Kansas State Board of Education in 2008, and they provide a foundation for family engagement for Kansas districts and schools. So KPIRC began communicating with teacher education programs across the state. We offered free resources and professional development on family engagement. There are a total of 24 institutions of higher education in Kansas that offer teacher education programs. In the last 3 years, CAPERC has provided professional development to 8 of those programs, reaching nearly 1,400 Kansas pre-service students. This includes pre-service students in early childhood, elementary, and secondary education programs. Because the response to our professional development in these teacher education programs was so eagerly accepted, in 2007, CAPERC created the IHE Curriculum Enhancement Initiative for Family Engagement to work more closely with these teacher education programs. CAPERC offered a small stipend to several IHEs that showed interest in enhancing their curriculum and family engagement. These schools were Kansas State University, Wichita State University, and Ottawa University. We have each IHE submit a plan annually according to the requirements on the left side of the slide. One benefit of this approach is that each university can design the enhancement to their curriculum according to their plan, according to their design. CAPERC provides professional development to pre-service students in their classes and meets with professors over their plans. For example, Wichita State University's plan focused on preparing secondary education students to teach in urban settings. In the WSU initiative, they targeted the PTA standards of welcoming, communicating, and supporting student success for their students' training for this year. One new activity they have included is to have pre-service students write letters of introduction to families in their student teaching experiences. Another activity was a book study during the teacher's practicum on Beyond the Bake Sale and Every Teacher's Guide to Working with Parents. And as part of a class requirement, pre-service educators were asked to construct a plan of methods to engage families. Ottawa University is a small private university in Kansas, and we cannot overlook the small private universities because in Kansas they produce more teachers when the total is combined than the larger universities. So their reasoning was that in order to truly know the topic of family engagement and impart it to their students, they needed to learn it first. So the faculty became a learning community around family engagement. And so in year one, the community did a book study on Beyond the Bake Sale. Faculty met to strategize which courses they could enhance and the manner it would be added to the curriculum. This year, the faculty is learning about the modules CAPERC developed with the University of North Texas, which are on the PTA standards, and that's the website that is on your slide. And pre-service students are required to address the professional education standards on family engagement and incorporate those as part of their e-portfolio. Kansas State University focuses on the general education and special education teacher preparation classes. Special education graduate students are asked to interview families with children with disabilities and video them. Then the undergraduates in the exceptional child classes view the videos and then write their teaching philosophy. Pre-service students meet with parents of a child with a disability to jointly develop a plan of behavior support and build a bibliography of helpful resources to share with families. CAPERC is conducting a pilot study on these curriculum enhancement initiatives, and today I've provided just some findings from the KSU initiative. In the pilot study, the students were grouped into a treatment group, those who received the enhanced family engagement curriculum training, and the non-treatment group, or the control group, the same section of class, but with no enhancements. Pre- and post-tests were given to the pre-service students before and after the enhancements, and then again 1 year later when the student had become a teacher. The 3 areas of focus for the pre- and post-tests were perception of their professional preparation in family engagement, the perceptions of the PTA National Family School Partnership Standards, and the perception of parent-teacher interaction. In regards to the professional preparation results, the KSU treatment group reported that after receiving the Family Engagement Curriculum Enhancements, they were better prepared to help parents support their children's learning at home and better able to understand how to build a family-friendly classroom environment. Not all of the data from the surveys on the PTA standards can be shared today due to time, but the treatment group demonstrated a stronger commitment to the sharing of power, Standard 5, and a stronger commitment to the inclusion of parents as partners and a willingness to respect the parent's ability to make educational decisions for their child. Finally, the results from the treatment group on teacher-parent interactions revealed an increase in the perceptions that teachers must regularly share positive news about the child with parents. Teachers and parents should work collaboratively. Teachers should provide parents with the information and the tools necessary to help their children become successful. So in summarizing the pilot study, PAPERC has found that the treatment group demonstrated growth in their understanding of the importance of family engagement and a confidence in working with families. The pre-service students that went on to become new teachers reported a better understanding of how to engage families and a better preparedness to engage families in their classroom. So as you can see, this is an exciting, interesting, and worthy topic of more research. And we will do our part by continuing these initiatives and aggregating the data from our work at the end of this year. Thank you for allowing us to share our work. Now let's go to Katherine to learn about teacher preparation at Columbia University.
Thank you, Jeanne. I'm going to speak to you about both the preparation that we're doing at Bank Street College and some of our work that we do at Columbia University Head Start. My affiliation with Columbia is through the Head Start program, so I'm not engaged in teacher preparation here. I'm engaged in in-service and in teacher preparation through Bank Street. To begin with, some of the early childhood professional standards for family involvement require and encourage parental involvement in all aspects of children's education. It's throughout the Head Start program performance standards, which outline truly significant ways in which programs partner with families and families indeed participate in governance in programs. The National Association for the Education of Young Children accreditation standards delineate multiple ways that programs are required to include families in order to achieve accreditation. And in addition, the National Board for Professional Teaching Standards, 5 core propositions emphasize teachers' skill in working with parents. So clearly this is really essential to quality teacher preparation across age groups. It's especially true in early childhood that we see significant teacher preparation in family involvement. Best practices in early childhood require intensive family involvement because of the close link between parent-child interaction and child development. Whereas Head Start requires programs to reach out to families, and AEYC requires programs to bring families in. These two approaches differ somewhat, but they have the same underlying goals. In order to implement either approach, a teacher must be comfortable and skilled in work with parents. Although, of course, early childhood teacher preparation programs require more coursework on parental involvement than middle childhood or secondary education, teachers still may feel uncomfortable or unprepared to work closely with parents, as we saw in the MetLife survey that's been cited already. The progressive drop-off in parental involvement throughout the years of schooling is often attributed to a lack of interest on the part of parents. However, decreased opportunities for parental involvement in these years may cause a great deal of parental disengagement in children's education. Lack of teacher preparation for engagement with parents contributes directly to the lack of opportunities for parents to participate in their children's education, which is then cited as a reason for teacher preparation programs and schools to focus on other areas than parental engagement. I think it's incumbent on all of us to break that cycle. So, what can universities and colleges do in order to prepare teachers to partner with parents? We, first of all, must begin to see our work with families as a core part of teaching. This can be done in various ways, which taken together will provide teachers with a strong multidisciplinary background in working with families. Teacher preparation programs must begin, if they have not already, to integrate family involvement throughout all of their courses. At some point, teachers should be introduced to basic concepts in adult development. All professions require skill in communicating with others. The teacher's role requires extensive communication, yet teacher preparation programs tend not to address interpersonal communication. Teacher preparation programs and in-service programs can engage in reflective practice with pre-service, beginning, and experienced teachers in order to deepen their commitment to work with families and refine their skills in that area. Finally, teacher preparation programs must prepare teachers to work in communities other than the ones they grew up and went to school in. Schools nationwide are enrolling an increasingly diverse student and parent body, and it is vital that teachers are skilled in working across cultural, linguistic, and economic divides. Integration of family involvement in all course content. Of course, it is recommended that pre-service teachers take at least one class in working with families, but this content, as I've mentioned, can and should be integrated throughout other coursework. Furthermore, teaching about parent involvement must be active, requiring students to engage with parents and or using case studies to deepen knowledge. At Bank Street, multiple courses describe the relationship with parents and require teachers to work with parents. One of our courses, Native Language Literacy for Spanish-Speaking Children, which is required in the bilingual program, requires students to work one-on-one with a child who is acquiring literacy in Spanish. After assessing the child's literacy level, students must conduct an in-home interview with parents about their literacy practices. Students in this course invariably comment that this project is particularly valuable to them and gives them additional insight into the home environment. Knowledge of adult development is also essential for teachers. Teachers are often called on to educate parents in small and larger settings when they explain a school's philosophy and curriculum on open school night, when they meet to discuss a child's delay in meeting academic or developmental expectations, and so forth. However, we train teachers to educate children, not adults. Teachers who have been instructed in basic concepts around adult development will have tools to use in working as adult educators in these situations. Communication techniques and skills. In the course of their careers, teachers are called on to communicate with parents in a variety of settings and for many purposes, not all of which are simple, positive, or harmonious. Studying communication techniques will assist teachers in communicating with parents throughout a range of situations. Again, these skills can be incorporated into existing coursework as well as into in-service sessions within schools. A workshop or class that provides one or two concrete tips for communicating with parents, along with a role-playing session, will go very far in advancing teachers' level of skill and confidence in communicating with parents under challenging circumstances. Teachers' outlook and attitude towards parents is key. I think we've seen some evidence of that today, particularly in Beatrice's example about the way she was greeted when she arrived in a school. When we prepare teachers to go into the field, we often ask them to take on classroom duties as student teachers, but generally do not require them to work with parents. Within a student teaching experience, pre-service teachers can be required to do a variety of tasks involving parents. Some possibilities might be making home visits, conducting parent surveys, assisting in a parent workshop, and conducting a focused portion of a parent-teacher conference. In order to increase confidence in working across cultures, some of these tasks can be done with families from cultures different from that of the student teacher. In addition, within coursework or in a supervisory setting connected to the student teaching, pre-service teachers can work with case studies and descriptions of various cultures that they may be working with. Another vital technique is reflective practice. Teachers at Columbia University Head Start meet twice monthly with supervisors to reflect on their practice, which involves extensive contact with parents. Work and supervision often centers around the teacher-parent relationship. Although this level of supervision is impractical in many settings, administrators and mentors can incorporate reflective practice into occasional meetings and in-service trainings, as well as into existing routines involving reflection on student work. For instance, staff meetings in schools and early childhood centers often include some sort of routine reflection on classroom practice. This can be expanded to include teacher-family interaction. Finally, it's vital that we prepare teachers to teach in communities that are not their own. The essential skills for this are basic knowledge of the languages spoken in the communities, even if that only means providing a greeting to parents, understanding of key cultural elements such as religion, gender roles, and approaches to schooling, and generally speaking, an openness to newness and the unknown. Work in communities that are not your own requires particular skills and provides special challenges. At Bank Street, a course on curriculum development in dual language and bilingual classrooms requires that students complete a thorough community study. This study includes taking oral histories, collecting extensive data on community characteristics, and interviewing community members. The experience allows students to see and experience multiple aspects of a community. This kind of concrete knowledge about a community, combined with openness to difference and newness, are essential to teachers' success in communities that they do not originally belong to. In conclusion, as teacher educators and administrators, we must place family engagement at the center of our work. Techniques for working with parents should be incorporated into teacher preparation courses and in-service trainings to help teachers feel confident in their work with families. Institutions that place family engagement at the center of their practice will see teachers engaging families in innovative ways to improve student outcomes. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane and Katherine, for shedding some light on how you can infuse family engagement into teacher professional development. I've received a number of questions from our participants, so I'll start with one from Jonathan Davis, and this is for both of you. Is the family engagement material generated by teacher educators or family studies professionals?
Jane, do you want to start with that?
Sure. In our particular initiative or programs, the material is generated by the teacher educators because they were the ones that were given the opportunity to enhance their curriculum. So at those universities, the material is generated by teacher educators.
Yes, I would say clearly at Bank Street as well, the material is generated by teacher educators. However, within the Head Start setting where I work, we use both types of materials.
Great. Thank you. We have another question from Deborah Messina-Pineman, and she wants to know, will we be able to learn about some specific strategies that are effective at the high school level for building a family-friendly classroom environment?
This is Katherine. I think that that's a really interesting question. One of the key things that we see in quality high school environments is a respect for the level of independence of students and their growing adulthood. So the challenge is to honor that while you still engage parents. And I believe that a really collaborative approach is necessary. Bringing parents in for events, perhaps that students plan, engaging them in some of the kind of work that we often see in elementary and middle schools where there's presentation of student work. There's no reason why we can't engage parents in this way at the high school level. There's just a few thoughts off the top of my head, but I think it's something that certainly merits consideration, but also we need to remember that just because a student is in high school doesn't mean that some of the same needs aren't present as have been prior.
And Michelle, I was just thinking that I think a high school has to re-examine what they're already doing. For example, their parent-teacher conferences and their open houses. And, instead of doing the same thing over and over, but to examine those and see how they can be made different. Are those open houses welcoming? Are parents given access to teachers? Are the parent-teacher conferences, two-way conversations. And they can, I have heard of some real creative ways to do parent-teacher conferences at the secondary level by taking a standard, doing a sample demonstration of teaching, and then a sample assessment question. And the final thing is that I really think there's no better time than right now for middle and secondary education to engage families, especially in the area of career planning. And so that they know where their child has showed an interest on this inventory, and then having them plan through high school the classes that would feed the child's interest. So I think it's just a good time for families to talk about career and future planning if educators can pull them into that conversation.
Thank you. Jane, I have another question for you. One of our participants asked if other states have programs like the PERC, and also how do folks find out if there are initiatives being implemented in their county, district, or state?
Well, the one thing, what I would suggest is every state has a PERC. There are 62 PERCs, and you can go to www.nationalperc.org to find out where your PERC is and who's in charge of that or whatever, and to put a phone call in or an email and ask them if they do any work with teacher preparation programs, and if they don't, would they like to? And every PERC director I know would very much jump at the chance to come into a university and provide some professional development or some conversations about family engagement. So that is how they could find out where their PERC is, who's in charge of it, and if their PERC works at all with teacher prep programs, and if not, if they'd like to.
Thank you. And this question is for both of you from Melissa Whipple. She wanted to know how professional development for principals and administrative leadership within schools can be provided. She says that many times teachers may be willing to engage parents, but the principals sometimes don't see the connection between parent engagement and student success. How have you been engaging principals and other school leadership?
This is Jane again, and what I can say is that when districts or schools ask us to come out and do some professional development, one thing that I do is that I request that the school leadership be there. So, and if I don't always request that, it doesn't always happen. So, for example, a week ago, there was a district in Kansas that was on improvement, and they requested that the PERC come out for some technical assistance. And so I requested that principals be there. So every principal from every school was at that training. So one of the things I think you can do is just request it and just say that, what you're sharing is more effective if the leadership is on board and understands it. And I couldn't agree more. And eventually knows, I'm thinking teacher and administrator evaluations could and I think should have family engagement as a piece, but it probably shouldn't be there on evaluation until it's in the preparation program. So I agree wholeheartedly that administrators lead their teachers. They lead them, and so and that affects families.
Absolutely. I think just very briefly that preparing administrators to lead and involve families can be done in much the same way that we work with teachers, so that we need to ensure that the same content is included in building leadership programs and in building leadership certification programs as for teacher certification. and that when administrators participate in internships, they go to intern in schools where there's a significant parent involvement component so that they can see firsthand, not only read research about the power of parental involvement in education.
Katherine, and I have a question for you. What kind of feedback have you received from teachers who've gone through the professional development program? Has this really changed their practice?
It really has. They feel more prepared to work with parents. They still feel like they want more. I think one of the salient qualities of teachers is that they are lifelong learners. So they always want to learn more. But they do feel that they're more comfortable working with parents. They feel that they have more strategies to work with parents and that they're able to find resources on an ongoing way.
Great. Jane, I have another question for you. The question is, how did your PERC approach the universities to open the door to family engagement education of new teachers?
We came bearing gifts, so to speak. That means lots of neat new resources. So if like 6 months or a year before we started the initiatives, I would do mailings to the 24 teacher education programs and say who we were, what we did, send them an article on family engagement, the importance of it. So I would just sort of, I was fertilizing the ground there for about a year through letters, and then eventually they just start calling in terms of, will you come do this professional development for a class or two? And then before you know, that grows, and you're really developing relationships with some of these professors. And those are some of the ones then that we developed into the enhancement initiative. So we began just with mailings and giving them free resources. Those were our gifts, and they love it. They love for their students to get information on family engagement. So we were really, really welcomed.
Excellent. I have a question for both of you. This question comes from Katherine Romano. How do we prepare pre-service teachers in the unique issues in urban or low-income schools when many have field placement similar to their own homeschool districts?
This is Katherine. I think that this is a really important question. First of all, when possible, I think it's vital that teachers have at least a short placement in an urban or a low poverty or high poverty level school. This may not be possible in all locations. However, in the places where it's not possible, educators can use a case study method where teachers look intensively at case studies of classrooms and families who live in urban or high poverty level schools, and they can analyze and discuss strategies for working in these settings. But again, wherever possible, I think it's vital for teachers to have an experience working with communities that are dissimilar from the ones they're most comfortable with.
And this is Jane, and if they haven't had that opportunity and they are in that position, I think that is where professional development is key. Yeah. So that administrator or somebody on the staff find someone in that community, whether it's the PERC or other qualified people, to come in and do some training on diversity. And this is a very, very dear point next to my heart, as I have a third-year teacher daughter who is teaching inner-city Chicago. And, of course, she is an Anglo, and she's taught 2 years at a 100% Latino school, and this year at a 100% African-American school. So very often, nearly nightly, we are discussing this very issue of diversity, and she did not have the training. She did not. So it's very important that administrators bring that training to their teachers.
Well, thank you, Jane and Katherine, for really launching this rich discussion. It was very enlightening. I would now like to introduce our final presenter, Susan Walker. Susan Walker is an associate professor of curriculum and instruction at the University of Minnesota. There she is the coordinator for Families, Youth, and Communities program area and oversees the Parent Educator License, Certificate, and MED programs. Her current research focuses on parents' use of technology, parent social networks, and the integration of technology into parent and family education. Dr. Walker's nearly 30 years of experience includes direct services to families, educational program design, implementation and evaluation, and public policy research in areas including school readiness, child care, health care, and parenting. She holds a PhD in Child and Family Studies from the University of Wisconsin-Madison and master's and bachelor's degrees in nutrition from Penn State and Drexel Universities. Susan? Susan, if you could unmute yourself.
Thank you. Thanks for the reminder. Greetings, everybody, from Minneapolis. What I was saying to myself was one of the frustrating things about being a presenter on webinars like this is that you hear such wonderful conversation from other people that you just want to jump in and be part of that conversation. So maybe after I'm done, we can get back there. I'm going to describe a university schools initiative that uniquely builds family engagement in K-12 schools from a foundation of interest in early childhood. Family engagement in children's early learning has been a value in Minnesota for a very long time. In 1984, the early childhood family education, sorry, I'm speaking to my presenter, my technical people. It's not advancing my slide. I may have to ask you to do it, and I'm sorry, everyone, my screen has completely frozen up. So if somebody could just move to the next slide, and I'm going to do this blind. In 1984, the Early Childhood Family Education Program was developed with state funding to school districts. ECFE provides parent education and early education to families and school districts with programs offered in school buildings and open to families in the state. Because of its statewide emphasis and distribution through school districts, ECFE hires only licensed parent educators. In fact, we're the only state in the U.S. to have a state teacher licensing for parent education. The University of Minnesota is one of the institutions to prepare parent educators. Although most of them only work with families in early childhood, because this has been a long-standing program in the schools and the presence of family education in schools and beginning in early childhood, I do think that this has opened the doors to embracing family engagement in K-12 education. And since the University of Minnesota prepares and does research both on parent educators and on teachers, we're kind of a natural fit to launch a new initiative for teacher preparation that integrates family engagement. I'm going to speak to you, if we could go to the next slide.
Yes, we're forwarding the slides for you.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to speak to you about the Teacher Education Redesign Initiative. This is a relatively new initiative that has been funded by the Bush Foundation, which is a private foundation that supports communities in South Dakota, North Dakota, Minnesota, as well as 23 tribal regions. The University of Minnesota, and this is an error in the slide, is one of 14 actually Midwest institutions that the Bush Foundation has funded for 10 years to improve high school graduation rates and reduce disparities in student achievement. And specifically, the College of Education and Human Development at Minnesota is revisioning teacher education program to prepare teachers for the 21st century. We're now currently in year 2. We've done quite a bit, but we really have a long way to go. There, if we can go to the next slide on key areas of redesign. There are 4 key areas of redesign with the Terry Initiative. The first is on partnerships. partnerships with local schools with the idea of professional development schools that will improve student performance. So rather than the idea of students just taking classes at a university and then being launched into the schools, that through a partnership with the schools, students will have clinical experiences throughout their training. The second is adaptive expertise. This is the idea of combining expert knowledge with students' ability to differentiate instruction for students' needs. And this coordination of both expertise and innovation will be assessed through teacher performance assessments. The third key area of redesign is performance-driven curriculum. This focuses on both what we teach as well as who we teach, and our core curriculum very much will involve family engagement integrated throughout the curriculum, and I'll mention that in a minute. And then finally, all of this is being researched, and our questions about effectiveness of our program and preparing teachers and who will make a difference for students. So not one of the four areas is more important than the others, and so it's very important that we keep in mind that while we're developing this program, every piece of it is being researched. If we can go to the next slide. This slide just simply shares some of the key elements of the Terry Initiative, focusing on student learning, not just on outcomes and achievement, but focusing on student learning, adaptive teaching, again, to differentiate instruction, diversifying the teacher workforce, having enhanced clinical experiences, strengthening our curriculum to embrace a broader range of content for 21st century teachers, improving teacher support, and measuring effectiveness. And throughout all of these, family engagement will be a part. If we go to the next slide. So where does family engagement fit into this? What will sound familiar to you from the other presenters is that a lot of this is a discovery listening to the research about how families really do make a difference in children's learning and children's outcomes. In addition to looking at that research, a lot of the Terry Initiative in 2008 was greatly informed by also listening to the voices of recent graduates, listening to first-year teachers and partner schools, and among 5 key areas, the teachers did say that they needed more preparation on working with families and communities. Go to the next slide. Family engagement in Terry again, has been thought of from the very beginning. In earnest, we began last summer of 2009 with task forces that were asked to really take a look at the research and initiatives related to specific content areas and look at how they impact student learning and avenues for teacher preparation. I was asked to head the task group on families and communities. And our task force included local and state leaders in the field, specifically around the area of family engagement. And I will say that we used a lot of the materials from a lot of the colleagues that are present at today's conference. Over the last academic year, while other pieces of the whole Terry puzzle were being nurtured and connected, information from that task force have been considered in these early stages of teacher performance assessment and curricular content. And this really continues today. We're actively considering the wealth of materials that are available to us. Again, very much of this is in process. So let me just talk very briefly about the 3 kind of primary areas of Terry where family engagement is being embedded. If we go to the next slide, redesigned curriculum. So one key area of this redesign is what we're calling common content. Now, this is traditionally the foundational coursework that PreService teacher students will take while they're at a university before they're launched. We've taken a look at all of that foundational coursework and basically are starting again from scratch by looking at these key areas of not only the content learning and the subject matter focus in the licensure areas, but also these key elements, including understanding families and communities. And a real key here, I think, is that we're not looking at creating a class for students on parent family relationships, or parent community and teacher relationships. We're really looking at filtering communities and families throughout the entire preparation for teachers. And this is a really long-fought battle when you consider the strict standards from the state and courses that have long been taught at the university, students that are required to take certain courses, negotiating credit requirements, graduation rates. So, revising this foundational coursework is really quite a big deal. We can go to the next slide. The second way family engagement is being embedded is through the teacher performance assessment. The TPA is reliable and a valid tool for assessing pre-service teacher performance that was created at Stanford University. The content areas such as math and science each have their own specific TPAs, but an element in all of them is a sense of context to test the features that would influence instructional decisions. And family and community context are very much a part of those context assessments. So again, teachers are being assessed on how families influence learning across all of the major subject areas, not as a separate pull-apart course that tests them, say, on their skills in parent-teacher conferences. And the next slide, please. And finally, the third part of the model is the TeacherParent Partnership. These are partnership schools that are working with the university to provide practical experiences across the 15-month curriculum. So again, rather than waiting until students have finished their campus-based coursework, the application to the clinical experiences in the schools would happen throughout the lifetime of the students' time learning during their time on campus. And a real advantage of this school partnership is a coordination of values and the consistent communication on the realities of what the students, the teachers, the schools, the families, and the communities need. And I think that this is another really exciting piece of this. So this isn't just, going to the schools and saying, now our teachers are prepared, or this is what they're going to do, or we've trained them on family engagement, but it's really listening to the schools and having the schools be a real partner and shaping the learning experiences for the students. Final slide, please. The next slide. And so that kind of brings us to where we are. I mean, this is, we're only 2 years into this out of a 10-year program. And, there's still a lot that needs to be done. A lot of the work, if you have specific questions about what family engagement is going to look like in this curriculum, I really couldn't tell you because we're still really developing it. And again, we're looking at models such as Jeanne's in Kansas to really inform us on, different ways that teachers can be assessed and trained. But in 2 years, considering it's a major research one university, the progress really has been tremendous. The task groups were formed, provide recommendations that are really being considered. The college has been building both internal and external coalitions, and I will say that these coalitions involve all of the people whose questions have been asked about today, principals, school administrators, community leaders. It really is quite exciting to see the breadth of people represented. Committees, individual committees just looking specifically at these partnerships, looking specifically at the assessments, specifically looking at the common curriculum, specifically looking at research. So in 2 years for a major university initiative working with the communities, really a lot has been completed. But I'm very optimistic. I think that because family engagement is organic to this process. It's not an add-on. It's something that was addressed from the very beginning and will filter through the students' coursework. It will filter through the partnerships. It will also filter through the assessments. For being a non-teacher preparation professional, as you can hear from my background is a family one. I advocate, I educate, I research, I do everything for families. So coming at this from a family perspective, I'm actually pretty encouraged that this may be a real model that can engage individuals. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan, for sharing information on this groundbreaking approach to teacher professional development. It really does sound like your work on redesign will provide a model for other teacher colleges to implement So, as you said, this is very exciting. I do have a few questions for you from our participants. The first one is, are parents engaged in providing feedback on effectiveness of the curriculum training? And how are you engaging families in this endeavor?
I think probably the more appropriate question is how will we? Because the curriculum is still very much in process. We've kind of just thrown out all of the existing courses, and as a core content team, which again is really quite broad across the university and the schools, are really looking at these thematic areas and what are the most essential pieces that need to be included before we're even thinking about where it's going to show up in what content, in which way, and how pre-service teachers will be tested. So, all of that is still very much in development, but the external advisory groups that the college has engaged in this process do include parents and do include, school people. And so I think every step of the way, as there are pieces that are ready, you always have to be very careful with this, too, to not launch things before they're kind of ready for comment. So when they're ready, people will be involved. At this point, it's still in process of development.
And Nancy Balo wanted to know if the task force report is available to the public.
I don't think it is. I can get back to you on that, and if you give me your contact information. My understanding so far is that the task force reports, and there have been quite a number of them. I think there were probably 10 or 12 that were created, were more internal working documents, and they weren't part of the public, but I'll check on that. I will.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Another participant wanted to know, because you mentioned that you have a research university, they want to know, will you be collecting data on the effectiveness of Terry in helping raise student achievement?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that was a part of the book. And why the other part of that is why this is 10 years. This isn't just a couple years of planning and then launching it and then sort of moving on. They wanted this to have time to really develop, get into the partner schools, and have several cohorts of new teachers get into these schools, and all along the way then see how it's impacting the teacher performance, but then also the student learning. So yeah, definitely. That's a key part. That kind of research is a key part of this.
Great, thank you. Can you provide examples of how teachers can use skills from Terry training in the classroom?
Yeah, again, some of it is going to be, let's see, I'm faltering a little bit because, again, we're new enough into this that, we don't have too many tangible pieces. Part of it is I think we're talking about possibilities of case studies, students writing reflection papers that they would design, learning environments that they would do, design environments to really, a piece of this too, and I should include this, is that we are looking at families and communities. And so we're looking at, family engagement, but we're also looking at a sense of building community relations, but also building community, a sense of community within classrooms. And so, for instance, a type of assignment a teacher may do is to ask they may design a learning environment that would nurture a sense of community within that classroom. We're still just very much in process of looking at things. So I don't have too many tangibles yet on how the teacher's going to be specifically, developing their curriculum.
Great. I know that you're going to be collecting data on tying the Terry Initiative to student achievement, but are you also planning on collecting data on the parents' feedback?
I think that that's a good idea. I mean, of course, it's a good idea, and that's so far out on the ecological frame that I think it would be an inclusion to some research that would be done in the partnership schools when the teachers are doing their clinical experiences to measure the perspectives of the parents on how the teachers are doing. I mean, one of the things that we've talked about is having, they do this with medical students around their interviewing skills with patients, and are rated on, how their communication and their understanding and their empathy and, that kind of thing. And so we've been talking about a possibility of doing a similar kind of a clinical assessment of sorts with parents, with teachers, and I think in that kind of model, a parent would have they would be able to weigh in on how was it for them, what was it like for them, and then another underlying principle, as I mentioned, about the partnership schools, and because we're starting this dialogue early, and because we have so many players in this. I mean, this is pretty stunning for me working at a university to see all of these community players that are involved. That there are lots of opportunities for people to look at the individual assessments and weigh in on how was this for the parent, how was this for the teacher, but how was this for the school, how was this for the principal, and to really look at it more from an ecological approach. So I know it's a long answer to your question, but I would say yes, it's definitely being considered. And for people like me, I mean, one of my sort of my lessons in all of this, for being a family person embedded in a very big institutional situation for teacher preparation, and seeing the many things that they have to consider, and not just families, is the importance of being an advocate and being present and being patient. And I think that question about will parents be involved is absolutely the same kind of question that someone in my position would be asking. But what I've learned is you have to be around, you have to be patient, you have to be present, and you have to be an advocate to even be around to ask that question, for it to be heard.
Excellent. I do have a few questions for all of the presenters. We've seen a lot of questions about how to engage parents of English language learners, and how do we train teachers to partner with these parents in more meaningful ways?
This is Beatrice. Hello?
Uh-huh. We can
hear you. I was just going to say that I think engaging, first of all, just respecting, I think, the parents that have limited English proficiency is the first thing. I think that it is important that we see that they're actually welcomed in our school setting, and that where educators do not speak the parent's native language, that we make every effort possible to bring in translators that will assist us with that communication.
This is Katherine. I agree with Beatrice, and I think that it's important to emphasize that although we may not have staff members who speak a family's native language, it's essential that we do not ask children to translate for parents. That can be really damaging to the parent-child relationship. And also, there may be some issues about translator reliability, of course. I think also it's important for schools when working with non-English speaking parents to look at their own practices. Jeanne made reference to this in terms of high schools. I think also when working with non-English speaking parents, it's important for schools to look at themselves and say, okay, what are we doing that is welcoming to these parents? Are there ways that we can recognize and incorporate aspects of these families' cultures into what we do as a school? In the United States are very different from schools in other countries in many circumstances. And so in some ways it may be possible for schools to incorporate things about the cultures of the families that they're working with. Also, go ahead.
Thank you, Chuck, Jane, Katherine, Susan, and Beatrice for sharing these cutting-edge strategies that will truly bolster family-school partnership. We're out of time today, and so this will conclude today's webinar.